welcome back to my channel. It has been a very long time since I filmed a video. It's been a crazy couple of months. I've been in a bit of a reading slump. I've just had a lot going on mentally, emotionally, you know, like this time of year I think can be weird for a lot of people, and it's definitely been weird for me. So haven't really filmed anything, haven't really felt motivated to do that. Like, it is what it is, and I apologize for completely disappearing. And I kind of even thought about like not doing this at all, but I like watching people's videos and commenting sometimes, and like I like the whole community aspect of it, and I like talking about books. So I'm like, well, even if I'm not on top of it all the time, it's fun to do it occasionally. And sometimes people need to take breaks. So many of my favorite creators have just like taken breaks recently and then catch up, and life happens, and I'm always understanding. So hopefully you all feel the same way. And not that obviously I don't have a ton of subscribers who are like counting on me, but like every single one that I have, every single person who watches my videos is like really important to me. But yeah, so I'm gonna try and be a little better. I think it's easier this time of year when you're doing like end of year lists and stuff. That's kind of fun. So, but first I'm going to start with, I think the last wrap up I did was a September wrap up. So I'm going to do October and November combined. In those 2 months I read 6 books, which seemed like reading slump. I've been listening to a lot of music. I've just been in my own little world. But I'll start at the beginning. The first book that I finished in October was Late Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo, which is a historical fiction that takes place, I believe, the 1950s or 60s. It's been a while. Like, I'm not gonna remember a ton about, 1950s in San Francisco, and it follows this Chinese American girl who, I think she's like 16, 17, and it basically follows her as she figures out that she is a lesbian and falls in love, but it's also so very like based in that time period, so it's like there's a lot of obviously like problems with being queer at that time. Like, so yeah, so it's like the Telegraph Club is a lesbian bar, and so it goes into like that community and like the kind of underground queer community in the 50s, and how things are better than they were at points. Like her and her friend like meet like slightly older queer women who are like, oh yeah, this is normal, like everything's fine, like yeah, sometimes bars are shut down or whatever, and that just happens, you just find somewhere new to go. And so you're kind of learning through main character's eyes, Lily. You're learning about that through Lily's eyes, and then there's also a really interesting element of it that are almost these like, well, they're not almost, but they're like other stories from members of her family who are telling other elements of like the Chinese American immigrant experience that I found was really interesting, and a really interesting way to kind of tie in like the struggles of like the LGBT community with the struggles of like immigrant communities and like ethnic minorities and everything. And some of them weren't quite as interesting. I was like, can we get back to like the main story? Like, I'm really invested in Lily's life. But some of them, especially her aunt, had some stuff, and her aunt's like a scientist, and I thought that was really interesting. And I learned a lot about like communism and things like the Red Scare to kind of go along with the Lavender Scare that was happening at the same time. And it's really interesting. Like, I really loved Lily, and it really just made me feel so many things. In so many ways it's like a love letter both to like the Chinese American like immigrant community and the like queer community, especially kind of the butch femme dynamic, and how in a lot of ways that element is kind of like the backbone of like the lesbian community specifically, and I found that really lovely to read. And it's a young adult book. It just made me really happy, and it was at a time where I wasn't feeling the best, and I just loved having that. I listened to it on audiobook, and the narrator was really good. And I gave that, I actually didn't rate it because I wanted to think about it more, because I was like, well, I'm very like emotionally invested in it. Is it as good as that? But I think it's probably like a solid like 4-star. And I think if I read it when I was a little more in the target audience of a young adult book, it probably would have been a 5-star. So yeah, I definitely recommend that if you're looking for like a historical queer novel. Then the next book I read was Notes on Execution by Danya Kukafka. This, which I gave 5 stars, it's one of my favorite books I read the year. I'll be doing like an end of year list, hopefully, and talking about this book a lot more. But it was a pretty big release, I think, last year. It was on a lot of my favorite YouTubers like end of year lists and stuff. And basically it follows this serial killer who is on death row. It's the last like 12 hours of his life. And so you're following him like hour by hour, and you're in his head. It's actually in second person, those parts, and which is like, so it's like you, which is like such a mind fuck. And then the other chapters are the point of view of like women in his life, like his mother, like his girlfriend's sister, a cop, like stuff like that, like his victims and all of that. And it's just a really interesting, like, the lighting in here is kind of weird, but just a really interesting like character study and study of those really messed up people. And I felt like the focus was so intensely on like the victims and on all that, while despite the fact that it's like the majority of the content is from the serial killer Ansel's like point of view, I still felt like it was so like victim focused. And it's like, well, on one hand you do feel bad for him, like on the other hand, like he killed people, so you don't really feel bad for him, you know? It's like you understand like how he ended up like this. I did like annotate it a little bit, but mostly, yeah, just some like highlights. That's not gonna focus, but yeah, I highlighted it a little bit, and a lot of my annotation focused kind of on the concept of like choice and choosing good or bad things and all of this stuff. And I recommend it so much. I just love, I think the main reason I read and love books is to just understand people who are different than me, or to find myself in a book. Those are like the two main things. And this was very much like understanding someone so different than me. And I really loved it. I went back and forth from like the physical and the audiobook. And the audiobook had like 2 narrators, the one who did all the women and one who did him, which I thought made sense. And I loved that. Cannot recommend it enough. Like if you haven't read it yet, absolutely read it. It's like a literary fiction. It's not like a crime or a thriller in any way. It's like 100% a literary fiction. But yeah. And then because it was Halloween, I was like, well, I want to read something Halloween-y. So I read Halloween Party by Agatha Christie, which is a Poirot mystery. It's actually, I think, one of the later ones. Let me see what number. Yeah, number 36. And I think there's 47 or something like that. So that was interesting because I feel like most of the ones I've read so far have been kind of the first 25-ish or so. So that one, it's basically, it follows, there's like a Halloween party in this town and someone dies at the Halloween party. It's pretty messed up actually. A child dies. Like, let me just say that up front, like, because like you need the trigger warnings. A child dies. She's like 13. This is a book with Ariadne Oliver, who I haven't met yet. So I feel like the next book I need to read needs to be like the one where she gets introduced, because she's like a recurring character, the way the Poirot books have recurring kind of assistant detectives or cops or whatever. She's one of those. She's like a mystery novelist. So I'm assuming a slight self-insert from Miss Agatha Christie, but but she was fun. So I really liked meeting her, and I thought the mystery was very interesting. And I think it was one where I kind of like predicted parts of it, but like in a way that felt like I was like solving the mystery with him, which was fun. And because sometimes it's like you predict it because you're like, oh well, it's gonna be so and so because of course it is, like, but this one it was like every bit of information we figured out like helped me get to it, and then I didn't quite get to the final. And I do, the way that it like ended, we kind of missed that like big Poirot moment of like revealing everything that happened for some reason, for like another climactic moment with like another character that didn't feature Poirot, which I didn't really understand or like, but I thought overall it was interesting. I didn't love the amount of like child abuse in it, so definitely don't recommend it if that's a thing you can't handle reading. But I also didn't review that one. I was just apparently not feeling reviewing at this point, but that's, I don't know, it's a slightly above average Poirot, so like almost a 4, 3.75. I don't know, it was a good Halloween thing. I'd recommend reading it around Halloween. Like, I wouldn't recommend reading it any other time because you're just gonna be like, eh. But then I just randomly was checking books by authors I had heard of. I was looking for something like a little shorter to try and help me with my reading slump. And I found that Scribd, which changed its name, but ever something, had Thornhedge by Kingfisher, and it was less than 4 hours. And so that is basically, it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling, sort of. And so it follows this main character, I believe it's called like Toad. Sorry, Toadling. And like it starts from her point of view, and I mean it's all from her point of view, but like she has this castle, this keep that she has to protect, and all this like briars around it, and you kind of watch her watch the world go by. For whatever reason she can't leave this, and she is like a fairy of some sort. You don't really know what she is. You learn more about her throughout the book. You learn her story. And the action of the book begins when basically this man comes up and he's like, I read about this in a book, this keep with the thorn hedge around it, and I want to get in. And she's like, no, leave. And eventually they kind of strike up like a friendship and a relationship, and he's like, I think you are the princess trapped in the tower and I want to rescue you or whatever. So it's all about that. You learn her story. It's a really interesting like twist on the princess who needs rescuing thing, and I just found that it went some places that I wasn't expecting, and I really like it. I like fairy tale retellings. I feel like can be kind of hit or miss. Like sometimes if it like sticks too close to the story, it's like, well, I'd rather just watch the Disney movie or read the original or whatever. And then sometimes if it goes like too far, you're like, so you just like stole one part of it and then made it like weird. Like all those like dark romance, like fairy tale things. I'm like, this has almost nothing to do with like Hades and Persephone or whatever. I mean, that's a myth, but you know what I mean. I couldn't think of a fairy tale. Like, and I felt like this kind of hit that perfect middle, and it was at points like a little boring. I think like it was for someone maybe a little bit younger than me or whatever, but it was a great audiobook to listen to when I was kind of doing other things, cleaning, trying to be a human. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really loved the writing and definitely want to read more T. Kingfisher, like, going forward. So if you have any recommendations of what I should read next, definitely let me know, because I'm not really sure where to go. I feel like I've written so many different genres and I kind of like a lot of different genres, so I'm not really sure like what's the best. But yeah, so I guess I'd give that like a 4. I don't know. Yeah. Then I was like, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is coming out and I want to reread all the Hunger Games books and get back in a Hunger Games mood before that comes out. I started this like, literally I had tickets to see the movie like on Friday and I started this plan on like the Sunday before that or whatever, so didn't really work well. But I started with the audiobooks. So I've made it through the first 2, so Hunger Games and then Catching Fire, and I'm currently about 75–80% of the way through Mockingjay right now. And I mean, I feel like everyone knows what the Hunger Games are at this point. It is a mid-2000s, I want to say the first one came out in like 2007 or 8, young adult dystopian novel. Follows Katniss, who gets chosen as a tribute to fight in the Hunger Games, which is like this arena where the Capitol, which is like the ruling upper class 1% in this post-apocalyptic kind of, it's like a post-war thing in America. Like the Capitol's kind of in like the Denver area. So they fight in this, Capitol has 2 tributes from each district. The rest of the country is divided into districts, fight to the death in the arena in the Hunger Games to like punish them and remind them why they never should rebel again, and just like subjugate them and keep them like under the thumb of the Capitol, because of course, like as always, the Capitol and the 1%, the people who live in that perfect world, are outnumbered by everyone else. So as soon as all those other people realize that their life sucks and life in the Capitol is really good, they're obviously gonna revolt. So the whole point is just to kind of like keep them down and to make them believe that like it could be worse, and this is the power of the Capitol, we kill your children. So that's really messed up. It's basically just a war story. Like the first one is very like focused on the Hunger Games, and then after that it just becomes so much more about the rebellion and the war and everything. The movies are great, the books are better, but the movies are like great, like legitimately, like except for a couple like casting issues I have, they're like perfect, and they are just as good like as a reread. Like I haven't reread them in at least a decade, and they genuinely hold up. Like I was crying in Catching Fire, like sobbing in the shower over some of the deaths, and it's just incredible. And I think I'm reading it differently as an adult too. Like I understand more about the worlds than I did when I was 20 or whatever when I read them. So I understand a lot more of the metaphors. I think that with everything going on right now in Palestine, that a lot of it is actually like really relevant. There's this passage that I just read technically in Mockingjay that was basically just about like the Capitol being like, you have to stop like fighting, like, but being like, but if the rebels stop fighting, they lose everything. And I thought that really hit me with everything going on right now. That like for some people, these conflicts and these revolts are a lot more life and death than for other people. And yeah, it just, the love triangle aspect of it, I think gets overhyped in general. And when I read it when I was younger, I was very much like falling for that. And now as an adult, I'm just very much like, I think both of those boys play different roles in different phases of Katniss's life. And while I will always be a Gale apologist, absolutely she should have not ended up with him. He was the Mockingjays' boyfriend, and Peeta was Katniss's, you know? Like, I think that's the difference. But yeah, I really enjoyed those, and I'm really excited. I should probably finish Mockingjay in the next couple days, and then start on The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I've never reread, so, because I read that when it came out. And I saw the movie, and I really liked it, and I've been all back in the Hunger Games, watching like video essays and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah, I might have only read 6 books, but none of them were bad, and I feel like I DNF'd a couple, but that's whatever. One of them I was just like, it was like a compilation of like comic strips, and I was just like, these aren't really hitting. And then other things was like kind of soft DNFs. So I've got some more books I want to finish by the end of the year, mainly The Hunger Games, and then I'm in the middle of The Myth of Sisyphus, and I'd really like to finish If We Were Villains before the end of the year. But yeah, hopefully my next video will be my favorite books of the year. I'll probably do a post-Christmas haul. Maybe I'll do books I'm excited for next year, stuff like that. I'm hopeful that I can at least get like 2 videos a month up right now. And yeah, I'm happy to be back here and talking to a little camera about books again. So comment and tell me what you've been reading, or freak out with me about The Hunger Games. Yell at me for having been Team Gale when I was 20. I love Peeta, I do. Thank you so much for watching.